In May of 1970, I was a graphic design major at Kent. I was a second-year senior already. And as part of my graphic design major, I had to take a photography class. So I had my camera, I had black and white film loaded in the camera. Had actually been working on a cartoon for the Stater that morning about how Campus Day, which was coming up the next weekend, was probably going to be a little bit different because of all the National Guard on campus. And was working on that in the Chestnut League office when I heard the bell outside by the Commons. And picked up my camera and went out and saw the group forming by the Victory Bell and the National Guard troops forming up around the remains of the ROTC building. Captured parts of the tear gas being lobbed at the students and the students throwing the tear gas canisters back. And when the guard started moving out to move the students, I captured an incident where there was a guy that I always used to call the guy with the briefcase, because he was in a lot of my photographs. And I met him later. He turns out he was a Vietnam veteran who was yelling at the guardsmen basically about how stupid their tactics were. And this guardsman confronted this guy in the parking lot right where I was standing, right in front of me. And it was a little scary incident. And then when the guard went up across the hill, I followed him up there, and when I crested the hill by the pagoda, they were in the practice football field. And I continued to take some photographs and was pretty much running out of film. The guard started to move away from the students down the long axis of the football field, and I thought everything was over. And my girlfriend at the time was working for the Stater, so I walked inside the door, the back door of Taylor Hall, apparently just as the guard turned and fired right through the area I'd just been standing in. I had only been in the Stater office just a minute or so when we heard people screaming and running, and I remember somebody popped their head in the door of the Stater and said, "They just killed 4 kids." And I remember turning to the people I was with and saying, "No, they didn't shoot anybody," because I saw them fire a warning shot in the air. I think I was one of just a handful of people that saw that. And I only saw it because it was in the viewfinder of my camera just before it happened. And I just couldn't believe it at first, but as more and more people were screaming and running into Taylor Hall, I knew something had happened. And we stayed there for a minute or two and finally saw the guardsmen marching down back into the Commons. I went outside. First thing I saw was Jeff Miller's body. And I kept saying to myself, no, he can't be dead. He can't be dead. And seeing an ambulance come over the hill, and I thought, oh good, they're going to pick this guy up, and the ambulance just went on by to somebody else. And I think it was at that moment that I realized that this guy was not alive. And heading back down into the Stater office with friends, and a siege mentality took over. I mean, we were actually looking at the guard reform on on the Commons, and I thought if they started to move on the students again, people were going to run into Taylor Hall. I was convinced that the guard would follow them in this time and probably be shooting, as well as shooting tear gas. We actually set up a little hideout, if you will, in the dark room in the Chestnut Burr office, because we talked about it. We talked about it very calmly and rationally, saying, well, you know, there's 2 cinder block walls that they'll have to shoot through to get to us here. I think about that in retrospect, and it was just insanity that I would be saying words like that. But that's what we did, and we taped up cardboard over the air ducts to keep the tear gas out, and had our little nest ready and went back out, and it wasn't long after that that they closed the campus.